One bus to rule them all, one bus to find them, one bus to bring them all and in the darkness bind them. No, I haven't slipped into a narcissistic delusion about Wilson. I simply made a connection between my VW bus and my favorite literary work. The world has changed. I feel it in the water. I feel it in the earth. I smell it in the air. Much that once was is lost, for none now live who remember it. Do you recognize the quote? This was the opening by Galadriel in The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, where she bids farewell to the magical second age of Middle-earth. But there's nothing to fear here, folks, because as I've talked about many times, The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit are some of my favorite books and films. And I thought it was about time that I honored them with a connection to Wilson, my 1967 Volkswagen camper bus. How did we get there from here, you ask? Well, let me take you back just a little bit to the October 5th, 2025 Union Car, Truck, and Bike Show. My son Zach and I were hanging out in Wilson, front row to the soundstage with our buddy George Bug. And as we enjoyed the festivities during the day and chatted with George about the work that we've done on our Volkswagen buses, George admired the wooden headliner in Wilson and asked if I had done anything to preserve the wood. It then occurred to me that I'd never got around to putting anything on that wood since I've owned the bus, and I've always meant to do something to it. So after a bit of research to figure out what would be the best product to use, I decided that I would rejuvenate the headliner with a product that had a ton of good reviews called Howard's Feed and Wax. So I went to my local big box hardware store and I grabbed the very last bottle that was on the shelf. I was surprised, though, that the bottle wasn't sealed, but I didn't think too much of it. And then later that evening, I was at another store and I happened to find another bottle of the same Howard's Feed and Wax, and that bottle was factory sealed. So I purchased the sealed good bottle and returned the open bottle back to the first store. I didn't want to take any chances. So I promise I'll get around to the Lord of the Rings connection at some point in this rant. Just hang on with me. The wood conditioner is a thick, jelly-like goop with a very pleasant orange scent. And so I began applying it to a rag and rubbing it onto the wooden headliner. The directions say to give it 20 minutes and then to wipe it off, but it's soaked into the wood pretty quickly. So I decided to give it 2 coats and to let it sit overnight. I started in the front and worked all the way to the very back, and the next day everything looked great. This is where the story will start to make sense, hopefully. Because while I was on my back working on the headliner of the bus, I looked at the rear cabinet that's mounted to the ceiling of the bus, and that has never had the back side or the underside addressed. I'd meant to do something with this area because when you lay down and you look up at the underside of the cabinet, it was just unfinished wood, and it was pretty scuffed up. I previously had made a panel to cover the underside of the cabinet with the blue Westie plaid material, the same material that's used on the seats and on the door panels, but I had never installed that panel. Then occurred to me that I should use this area to display maybe a map. Now, as I've mentioned more than a few times before, The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings trilogy are some of my favorite all-time stories, and I will watch them or read them almost every autumn. Now, I had just finished binging on the movies again, and while browsing online, I found a very accurate reproduction of the map of Middle-earth from an online art store. After a bit of measuring, I realized that I could fit both a map of Middle-earth and also Thorin's map of the Lonely Mountain from The Hobbit onto the underside of the cabinet, so I pulled the trigger and purchased the prints on canvas. These are not handmade paintings, unfortunately, although I wish that they were, but they're very detailed prints and they look real nice. I also found a vintage-looking painting of the Fellowship of the Ring with the 9 characters leaving Rivendell and walking across a bridge. It was done in a bluish-green hue, which not only matched Wilson's interior colors, but also fit the 60s and 70s vibe. The 3 pieces arrived in a few weeks from all over the globe, and I set out to start removing them from their frames and measuring and cutting them to glue them onto the cabinet. I used my 3M Super 99 adhesive spray and applied a coat to both the cabinet and to the art, letting everything tack up before pressing them firmly together. I finished up the bottom rear edge of the cabinet with a custom piece of wood molding that my friend John and I had made. Now, when I'm lying down to sleep on the rock and roll bed, I can look up to see both maps, and when you open the rear hatch, you now see the back of the cabinet has the fellowship artwork. I'm not really sure if anyone else is going to see this, honestly, because you either have to be either pretty tiny or sleeping in the bus to be able to see the maps. I mean, I'm 6'4", and I really can't see any of it while standing outside the bus. If you want to see what this all looks like, just take a look at the Wilson the VW Bus Instagram page. It has also been that time of year here in the northeastern part of the United States that we need to deal with the autumn leaves. In particular, at my home, I have the Russian sage that we grow and enjoy. During the spring and summer months, the honeybees are all over the purple flowers, and the kids and I love the smell of the leaves when you rub them on your hands. But in the fall, you need to cut all of this back. So, once again this year, I decided to create some sage smudge sticks. If you're not familiar with the practice, the sage is simply bundled up with twine, lit on fire, and then quickly blown out to produce a nice smelling smoke, thought to cleanse spaces and people and get rid of any negative energy. So last year, I only made a few, and to be quite honest, I didn't know what size to make them. I saw a few images online and tried to replicate what I had seen, but there wasn't anything on the online photos for scale, so I made them way too big. Lesson learned. This year, I made each of the bundles about 6 to 7 inches long, just the right size to fit in the wooden box that I had also made last year to set aside for this project. I cut all the sage down, brought it into the garage, and then I went out to purchase some 100% cotton twine and cut a bunch of pieces about 2.5 feet long. I made a little loop on one end of the twine and wrapped it around a handful of sage, and then began twisting and wrapping it all together. In the end, I had 50 sage smudge sticks to give away to my friends and my family, or anyone else that comes across Wilson during my adventures. If you happen to see me camping or at a show, let me know if you want one. Now, the final thing I want to talk about on this episode is Wilson's holiday lights. 2 years ago, I purchased 1,800 LED Christmas lights and taped them to Wilson and put them out in my driveway as part of my Christmas decorations for my home. I'd even contemplated putting an inverter in the bus and driving around with the lights on, but I just never got around to doing it. I didn't do the lights last year, quite honestly. I just didn't have time with my busy work schedule. But now, being retired, my granddaughter and some friends reminded me that they would like to see the festive VW bus lights again this year. So I thought it would be much easier because I didn't have to re-engineer the thought process of how to install the lights. I just had to apply what I'd done 2 years ago and redo it. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. In the past 2 years, since I last taped lights onto the bus, I not only had done some paint correction to a few areas, but I had also buffed Wilson's paint and had been applying detailer spray on a regular basis to keep the bus clean. Now, when I went to use the blue painter's tape to apply the LED light strings, Wilson's paint was no longer that rough, coarse, patinaed texture that easily allowed the painter's tape to stick to it, and my new paint was too slick. The tape didn't want to stick at all, and the lights just wanted to fall off. This was going to be a lot more work, so I set up my GoPro camera and recorded the effort. Last time, I made sure that all the doors were also accessible, but this time, I struggled so much with the tape issue that I just left the rear engine hatch and the driver's door with the ability to open. In the end, it all worked out, and I have a quick Instagram and YouTube video to show the results. Don't worry, I made the Christmas light installation a time-lapse video, so it only takes a few seconds to see the hours of actual work. I hope you get an opportunity to check it out. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I want to wrap it up by wishing you all a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and a Happy New Year.